prayer. All right. So we're going to start in verse 22, and I'll give a little background when we get into the rest. But so verse 22 of Acts 22, it says, "Up to this word they listened to him, and then they raised their voices and said, 'Away with such a fellow from the earth, for you should not be allowed to live.'" Wow, that's mean. "And as they were shouting and throwing off their cloaks and fighting and flinging dust in the air, the tribune ordered him to be brought into the barracks, and saying he should be examined by flogging, to find out why they were shouting against him like this. But when they stretched out for the whips, Paul said to the centurion who was standing by, 'Is it law for you to flog a man who is a Roman citizen and uncondemned?' When the centurion heard this, he went to the tribune and said to him, 'What are you about to do? For this man is a Roman citizen.' So the tribune came and said to him, 'Tell me, are you a Roman citizen?' And he said, 'Yes.' The tribune answered, I bought this citizenship for a large sum.' And Paul said, 'But I am a citizen by birth.' So those who were about to examine him withdrew him immediately and the tribune also was afraid, for he realized that Paul was about to examine him, withdrew from him immediately, and the tribune also was afraid, for he realized that Paul was a Roman citizen and that he had bound him. But on the next day, desiring to know the real reason they were being accused by the Jews, he unbound and commanded the chief priests and all the council to meet, and he brought Paul down and set before him. And looking intently at the council, Paul said, 'Brothers, I have lived my life before God in all good conscience up to this day.' And the high priest Ananias commanded those who stood by him to strike him on the mouth. Then Paul said to him, 'God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Are you sitting to judge me according to the law? Yet contrary to the law, you order me to be struck.' Those who stood by said, 'Would you revile God's high priest?' And Paul said, 'I did not know, brothers, that he was the high priest, for it is written, you should not speak of evil of a ruler of your people.' Now when Paul perceived that one part were Sadducees, the other were Pharisees, he cried out in the council, 'Brothers, I am a Pharisee, son of Pharisees. It is with respect to the hope of the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial.' And when he had said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and Sadducees. And the assembly was divided, for the Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, or angel, nor spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledge them all. Then a great clamor arose, and some of the scribes and Pharisees' party stood up and contended sharply, 'We find nothing wrong in this man. What if a spirit or an angel spoke to him?' And when the dissension became violent, the tribune, afraid that Paul would be torn to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take him away from among them by force and bring him to their barracks. The following night the Lord stood by him and said, 'Take courage, for as you have testified of the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you must testify alone and also in Rome.'" All right. So now, just to give you a backdrop, what happened with Paul met with the apostles. He was going to Jerusalem, and the apostles are the 12 men who had walked with Jesus, talked with Jesus, saw Jesus crucified, was there when Jesus resurrected. So these are the apostles. Now the apostles in that time, you have to understand, they are considered, now I don't want to say the elite, but they are considered the ones who know Christ the most, right? If I were to die and not my neighbor, but somebody in Kentucky wrote a biography about my life, would you believe it? If I didn't know that guy, would you believe it? Would you trust it? Right? If Tamika wrote a biography about my life, would you trust it? Tamika's my wife. I would hope you would trust it. Yes. So the reason the apostles had such high regard and honor for them, because they were considered to be the ones who knew Christ and knew His Word. So anything the apostles said or wrote, people respected that immediately. To speak anything against the apostles, that they will let you know. In the book of 1 John, there's a guy who is saying that John doesn't know what he's talking about. And John just clearly says to him, when I get there, I'll talk with that dude. Just clearly puts it out there like that. Because in that time, you could not go against the apostle, because they were considered like the guardians of God's very word. That's why every book we read is written by an apostle, or is approved by an apostle. So Paul went around as an apostle too. He saw the risen Christ. Christ spoke to him, gave him a message to give to people. Now, Paul was telling people they did not have to adhere to the law anymore. Now, the same way people view apostles is how they view Moses. Moses walked with God. Moses talked to God face to face. As a matter of fact, the Bible says that after Moses was done speaking with God, his face would glow. from the radiance of God's glory. It was so bright that Moses had to put, like, you ever seen the veil they have for a wedding? You know, you take that veil away. He had to have a black veil just to kind of hide some of the glory that was shining so bright. It's kind of, you know, because Moses we see every time we look at, you know, a movie, he's just got a face, but he was seriously walking with a veil over his face because people couldn't take their eyes off of it. So when Paul said you don't have to adhere to the law was written by Moses. So what people assumed was Paul is saying you need to dismiss God. Because anything that Moses said, people took as God saying himself. So they are assuming you're saying you got to dismiss God. And that's not what Paul was saying. He was saying you just don't have to follow all the practices of the law. Because Christ is the fulfillment of the law. In other words, everything that Moses proclaimed, it was a foreshadow of Christ to come. Everything, the law that had to be kept and living righteously, Christ was a foreshadow of that. He was a foreshadow of the character of God, the nature of God, the love of God. And now Christ is here. We don't have to do those things anymore. He's not saying it's wrong to do those things. Paul wasn't saying it wasn't wrong. It was wrong to, you know, wear your clothes a certain way. It wasn't wrong to keep to the certain traditions and customs of cleanliness that the Jews had. He wasn't saying that. He was just saying that's not going to bring you salvation. He was saying salvation comes through Jesus Christ alone. That's through faith and nothing else. And trying to work your way to heaven is not the way to do it anymore. That's not the way we do it. But some people took it as just straight disrespect, right? It would be like if I would say the Old Testament is pointless. We shouldn't ever read it. That's a lie, right? And so the apostles asked Paul, could you go down and go to the temple courts, take some of the Gentiles with you, and just pay for some of these guys who are Jews who are actually going to do some stuff for the Nazarenes. In other words, they're going to have their hair shaved for a whole week, and it's going to be a great deal, but I want you to pay for it. Paul's like, I got it, no problem. Because Paul's thing was he's all things to all people. Essentially, his objective was wherever the gospel was not spread, he would go. And he wouldn't conform. Yeah.
What do you mean when you say all things to all people?
Great, I'm going to explain that. All things to all people that he may win some, based off 1 Corinthians 9. And what Paul is saying actually right there is, I'm willing to go wherever. All right? Now, here's an example. Where are we? Right. Who of you, and be honest, when you were 5 years old said, I want to move to Iowa? Right? Who of you said, you know what, not only Iowa, I want to go to Esterville, Iowa right now? Right? When I was a kid, exactly, right? I wanted to go to Atlanta. Still do sometimes. But, you know, I didn't have aspirations to be an assistant manager in the eggplant. My degree's in theology. I'm looking for the $85,000 paying job because I have a degree, because I'm that conceited, right? That's what my thought was back then. But you go where God sends you. Now, I know what mudding is. I didn't think that. I've been to the county fair and seen a cow fart. That's right. Still wondering about that. I have 2 trucks because in Iowa you got trucks. And the thing is, essentially, you go where they go. Wherever the people are, that is where you go. So Paul was willing to go wherever the people are and be with them. So if he had to go to a place where they practiced Jewish customs and traditions, Paul would do it. And his hope was he'll win some to Christ. Right? You're here in Iowa with the hope that you can lead somebody here in Iowa to Jesus. That's why we're here ultimately. We're not here because it's a nice, peaceful area. You know, I know where I grew up. If I don't lock my doors to my cars, I don't stress out. I don't. Because I'm in Iowa. I'm in Esterville. If I forget to lock the front door, I've left this garage door wide open. I left my front door unlocked, and I came back like, oh man, I forgot to close it. Now, if this was St. Louis City where I grew up, you come in, dang. You know, you can always tell them they stole your system because they leave the TV on for you, and all you got is static showing because they got all your stuff. Right? You don't have that here. But that's not why we live here. We live here for the sake of Christ, bringing others to Jesus. So this is why Paul was willing to go. And this is what it means to be all things to all people, that you might win some. Everyone in Esterville is not going to come to Jesus just because we're here. You have to know that. But some might. And that's why we're here. So when Paul goes to the temple, He's going to help some of the Jews out. But understand too, we kind of mess up evangelism a little bit. To evangelize means to go to where God sends you and share Christ and lead others to Him. But we take the evangelism as invite you to church. Invite you to a youth group. Hey, my pastor's having a get-together. Why don't you show up? Right? We do those things. Lord knows I've done it. I don't want to tell you about Jesus. Just, come to church. When I was in Illinois, we had this great church. Had music, had sounds. He had donuts and coffee. We had a great kids program. So what I would do is, hey, just come to church. Who's Jesus? You don't need to hear it from me. But that man right there can tell you about some Jesus. And what's supposed to happen is what? You get saved. Your friend, at the end of the service, they stand up. They give their life to Christ. They're crying. They walk front to the altar. And you just sit there, yes, Jesus, it worked. Right? But the way Paul and the apostles saw it was you go to where people are. So you go to the temple, Paul. Unbelieving Jews at the temple. Go where they are and bring them to Christ, Paul. We can do this. So Paul's going there. He went there, and this is all in Acts 21. Paul goes there, and he's sitting down just like you and me. Now, in the temple, there are a couple of courts. There's the court of the Gentiles. Then there's the court of the women. And then there's the court of Israel. And then there's the temple, and in the side of the temple is the Holy of Holies. So there's certain places you can go. If you're not Jewish by birth, you stay in the court of the Gentiles. So if we went there, we'd be in the court of Gentiles. This is Middle Eastern too. So they didn't look like us. The speculation is a lot that Jesus looked like us. He looked nothing like us. He was Middle Eastern. And if you ever go to Israel, find one brother that looks like you. It's not going to be there, right? So because we're from the northern part or the southern part of Africa, but Jesus is in the middle part. So Gentiles stick out. If you don't look that part, we would stick out. If we go to Jerusalem right now, we would not blend in.
They don't have any black people in Israel?
Not looking like us. No, not as dark as us. No. They do, but they're not. I'm saying not a whole collection, right. Not the entire state of Israel, no, right? Yeah. That's what I'm saying. So if we would go there, they would say, "Hey, I think you're not Jewish. You're right, right? How did you know? What gave it away?" And so when you went to there, if they saw you were a Gentile, you got to stay in that court. If you didn't go if you went past that court, there's a warning sign saying, "We will kill you. Stay in your spot." Got it. Right? And then there's the court of women. If you're a woman, you don't go past the woman's court. You're right here. You're good. Then there's the court of Israel. Jews go there. Everybody else is right there. And then there's the Holies of Holies. So Paul is sitting there. He's going to the court of Israel. He's walked past the court of Gentiles, the court of women. Now he's going to the court of Israel. And then to the Holies, and not to the Holy Holies, but then they're going to keep going towards the temple. Some people see him. And they recognize some of the people with him are Asian. They're from Asia Minor, okay? So they see them and they say, "Hey, I see them." But they're in the court of Gentiles. They haven't moved. They see Paul and they say, "That's the dude who's been turning the world upside down." Paul's got a reputation. How many of you ever gone anywhere in this town and people know you before you get there? They see you and go, "I know that dude." And they come talk to you. Now, the thing is, the reason we know people is because our reputation precedes us, right? People know you. If you go to Iowa Lakes and, "Hey, you know Jasil?" Yeah, let me tell you about him, right? We go to Kingston Harbor. You know Adrian? Yeah, AJ, dog guy. Yeah, you know what? The other day he told me this story, right? We go to Avira. "Hey, does anyone see Bree?" "Oh, Bree? Yeah, Bree. Girl, that girl can cook." Let me tell you now, yesterday she told me, right? A reputation precedes us. So that's how people know us. When I walk into the room, people go like, "Kurt Franklin," right? Immediately. So, I know, right? But reputation precedes you. So they knew Paul, right? They knew what Paul used to do. And what Paul used to do was go to the synagogue, drag you out, beat you up real good. "Do you confess Jesus as Lord?" "Yep." Kill him. That was Paul's thing. Paul got converted. And now everybody knows that Paul, when he walks to a room, he talks about Jesus. He proclaims Christ. The Jews see this, they get upset, and they accuse Paul of bringing Gentiles into the courts and defiling the courts. This makes people upset. They get people riled up. They grab Paul and beat the living stuffing out of him. I don't know if you've ever been jumped. Only been jumped. Jumped is when a whole bunch of people beat you up. Yeah, I'm trying to, right? I'm trying to. Yeah.
I mean, it was like a couple of, you know, it was like some girl
Mm-hmm.
who was like trying to argue over stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
man, she was like, she had like 2 straight friends around. And
Yeah. And the next thing you know,
they friends.
and you don't know who to go for. You just
So I was there. Oh, I gotta get out of here.
Yeah, right. Look for an exit. I hear you. I only got, I think it was only once. I'm pretty sure. I do think there was twice. I think the second one I try to forget. But the first one, you know what happens? They try to beat you and leave you, right? Or I've seen people get jumped, and the objective is to beat them so bad that they can't move. So this happened to Paul. He was beat so bad he was left on the ground. A centurion or a soldier sees him getting beat, and he snatches him. He grabs Paul, and he wants to find out what's going on. So he orders other soldiers around. You know, because what happens when the police show up and somebody gets jumped? Everybody scatters. They run quick in all forms of directions. So people scatter, they grab Paul, but this time they're chasing after Paul. They want Paul dead. So they chase after Paul, and Paul is being walked to the steps. He got beat so bad he can't even lift a foot up. And they have to drag him up or carry him up the steps. And this is kind of where we pick it up. Paul gets to a point where he can actually talk. And he says, listen, can I say something to the people? So Paul speaks in Hebrew. The people hear Paul speaking in Hebrew and they get quiet. Then Paul begins to explain. He gives Jewish history, and he ends up saying Jesus is the Messiah. He is the Christ. And that's where we pick it up in verse 22. Just wanted to get all that background. Okay, up to this word they listened to him. Then they raised their voices and said, away with such a fellow from the earth, for he should not be allowed to live. Now that is pretty mean. They're saying Paul shouldn't even exist. He should die. We should kill him. And as they were shouting and throwing off their cloaks and flinging dust into the air. Now listen, the reason they throw dust into the air is because they're saying he should be stoned. Now I don't know if you know what a stoning is in Jewish customs or traditions and history. You don't throw big stones. You take a stone that you can hold in your hand. And the objective is not to kill them with one hit. The objective is to daze them, make them confused, keep hitting them until the stones pile up all the way to their neck. Right? And they're not dead yet. They're just very severely beaten. And then you start throwing stones at their head until essentially they die. Yeah, that's pretty rough. So when they say stone you to death, that's what they mean. Not taking a huge boulder and killing you. So when they're throwing dust in the air at Paul, that's what they're saying. This is what should happen to him. You should let us kill this man. So they're doing this, right? Now the first thing that probably happened, the next thing that happens here, Paul gets stripped, right? He gets stripped down to his waist. They say, listen, how about we just take him and we'll question him? Now, the way that Romans questioning people was they stripped you all the way down to your waist. They bound your hands together and they pulled you with this leather strap, wrapped it around a pole, and then they just whip you back. Now, we're thinking, when we think of whip, we might think of slavery. We can get whipped like that. The whip that they had was called the cat of nine tails. And pretty much what it was designed to do was to stick into your skin when you got hit with it, and then it gets yanked back out, pulling everything out with it. That's what they're about to do with Paul. Now, before we think to ourselves, oh, poor Paul, it's horrible. You have to understand this is what happened to Christ. This is actually expectation that we can expect if we're going to live for Christ. Because this is what persecution looks like. It's just an extreme form of it, but this is what it looks like. It's unprovoked hostility. So when they're about to whip Paul, Paul says, hey, is this what you do to a Roman citizen? And the guy's like, no, we can't. That's against the law. And Paul's like, well, I'm a Roman citizen. Right? This is who I am. Because Paul says it's lawful for you to flog a man who is a Roman citizen and uncondemned. When Satina heard this, he went to the tribune and said to him, what are you about to do? For this man is a Roman citizen. So they stop. They stop there, right there, because they're scared. They're totally scared. Now, unfortunately, like we think Paul, he's grown accustomed to this. Right? Have you ever grown accustomed to the fact that if I share Jesus, something's going to happen? If I start living for Christ, I know what's going to happen next. Typically, people are excited. Hey, man, I gave my life to Christ. Oh, praise God. Hey, man, I'm going back to church. I'm going to give my life back to the Lord. I'm following Jesus. Oh, man, that's wonderful. Now, they're okay with that until it interferes with their lifestyle. Right? If I start living for Christ, I know what's going to happen next. Typically, people are excited. Hey, man, I gave my life to Christ. Oh, praise God. Hey, man, I'm going back to church. I'm going to give my life back to the Lord. I'm following Jesus. Oh, man, that's wonderful. Now, they're okay with that until it interferes with their lifestyle. Right? My friends are okay with me following Jesus until I start telling them about themselves, about their lives. Hey man, let's go kick it. Nah, man, I can't do that. Why? That doesn't, that's not who I am anymore in Christ. I hate my wife. I don't talk to my wife like that. Why you talk to your wife like that? Well, I know she bothers me. Well, my wife bothers me too, but I love her as Christ loved the church, so I can't treat her like that. And then you know what happens? People turn on you quickly. And it's quick, isn't it? It's not like they give you a warning text like, hey man, tomorrow when I see you, I'm just going to tell you how I feel about you. No, first it's very passive and quiet. And then it leads to a conversation. And then it leads to that big argument. You were having the argument. Well, you changed. Well, what? You used to, and now, man, you know what? You're nothing but a fake. You used to be my friend. Now you're like, I just came over for the barbecue. I didn't know we were going to be. So do I leave? It happens that quick. They turn on you. And unfortunately, you get used to it, right? You get used to it. And to the point where I've done this before, and thank the Lord I'm getting better and not doing it, I count down, when is the friendship going to mess up? Oh, it's been 3 months. Whew, okay, they ain't said nothing yet. Oh, we're at a year. Okay, looking good. Oh, 1.5 years. I'm a jerk. I'm too honest. I'm a liar. I'm this, I'm that. I'm a hypocrite. And boom, it's gone. This was Paul's life everywhere Paul went. There was only one spot where Paul didn't face any opposition. Everywhere Paul went, things would be going well, and all of a sudden they had to get Paul. Paul had to be taken out of town by night. When's the last time? The only person that I know in my life who had to leave a town under the cover of night was my grandfather, because they were going to kill him the next day. He's the only man that I know that had to get under the cover of night, had to leave the state of Mississippi and move to St. Louis, Missouri, because they were looking to kill him. Only man I ever known had to do that. But this was Paul's life. Paul was the kind of guy that you show up the next day. Hey, you seen Paul? Hey, we had to get him out of town before they killed him last night. Oh, okay. Let me just go back to my home. Right? That was his life. And so Paul has become used to this. But it's not poor Paul, because this is the life that we will face too as Christians. Now, the extreme of hostility that we face may not be the same as him. It might be you get kicked out of a church. It might be you get lied on. It might be people are telling you constantly you're too much. It doesn't take that much to follow Jesus. It could be anything. But listen, John chapter 15, you don't have to turn there, I'll read it to you. Verse 18 to 21 says this. If the world hates you, know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you are of the world will love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I choose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word I said to you, a servant is no greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they kept my word, they would also keep yours. But all these things they will do to you on the account of my name, because they do not know him who sent me. In other words, Jesus makes it very clear. This is the expectation. If they treated Jesus like this, what makes us so special? Right? Sometimes I think I am special and I should get different treatment. But they treated my Lord they treated God like this. So when they see you coming down the street, they're not going to like, oh, hey, it's just so, you know what? We can't treat him like that. He's a good guy. No, it doesn't matter. Now, this is not to say that you don't have your issues, right? Because every time somebody gets in an argument with you or says something about you, you can't say, well, you just of the world anyway. That's why you hate me. It's not to say that. But it is to say that those who truly do not belong to Christ, who do not love him, do not follow him, hate you. That's a hard thing to take in. They hate you because they hate Christ. And that's reality. That's just the hard truth. And that's the life that we are called to live. But notice that Christ never says you get to hate them back. It is not the okay to hate them back. And I'm being honest with you, I struggle with that at times. Sometimes I feel I'm justified in my feelings towards people. Sometimes I just really want to tell people how I feel. And then I try to do it in a good Christian way. See if that gets them, well, Lord, I used the scripture and I told them they were a jerk. No, that's not it, right? But the world will hate you. Now, in verse 22 on Acts chapter 20, verse 30, Acts chapter 22, it says, but on the next day, desiring to know the real reason why he was being accused by the Jews, he unbound him and commanded, that's the centurion, and commanded the chief priests and all the council to meet. And he brought Paul down and set before him. And looking intently at the council, Paul said, brothers, I have lived my life before God in all good conscience up to this day. Now, Paul is not proclaiming his own version of righteousness. He is saying, I'm innocent. Right? If I go before a court and they say, how do you plead? Not guilty. If I know I didn't do it, not guilty. I'm not going to sit there and say, I'm guilty of everything they just said. No, I'm not guilty. I didn't do it. Right? And Paul is saying, listen, I've lived with integrity before the Lord since the day of my birth. And then the high priest Ananias commanded that those who stood by him to strike him in the mouth. Then Paul said, God is going to strike you, you whitewashed wall. Are you sitting here to judge me according to the law? And yet, contrary to the law, you order me to be struck. Now, this is where Paul loses his cool. Now, just a test of honesty. How many of you have been living for the Lord and you face some kind of persecution and it's been like a continual thing, and then one day you just let it loose? You finally say what you've been wanting to say to somebody all that time. Right? Have you ever done that? Okay, I have. You never just told them about how you feel? Like, you're living for Jesus, and then they keep calling you. Say, you know what? You're nothing but a hypocrite anyway. You're gonna die and go to hell. You're burning, right? Or you think you never said that far, right? Good. Look at it. Just let it out, right? But you may say some other words, right? But other words, I mean, you just let loose and you say something that you probably shouldn't have said to them, whether it was true or not. But you just let it loose. That's what happened with Paul. He just got struck in the mouth, right? Listen, rarely have I been slapped without knowing it's coming. Half the time, I can kind of see it coming. I can prepare myself. But I've never just said, hey, listen, I love Jesus. Oh, right? And Paul, that one hit, it was enough. And Paul just told him, you're a whitewashed wall. What that meant was the graves were marked where it had limestone and it was white, bright white. So you can see a grave because if you're Jewish, you can't touch it. And inside the grave, of course, is a dead person. And Paul is saying, you're nothing more than a pretty coffin. And God's going to judge you because you're sitting here judging me according to the law. You don't live the law. Now, the backstory about the high priest Ananias, this was a corrupt dude. This was not a good guy. Matter of fact, he had just come back maybe a year or a couple of months from being on trial himself for being corrupt, cruel, and unjust. But for some reason, nobody knows why, he appeared back in Jerusalem freed of all charges. They don't know if he was released. They don't know if he was acquitted, but he was back. And now he's a new high priest that Claudius had put in place. So he's sitting here judging Paul. Now I want you to imagine.
You said Ananias?
The high priest Ananias, not the same Ananias that you see before. Yes, I know.
I was like, what?
That'd be like Adrian here, and there's an Adrian that lives across the street. Adrian in jail. What? No, not that Adrian, man. The one that lives across the street.
I was like, what?
Yeah, I know, right? It got me too the first time. I was like, oh, no. I thought the same thing, right? But anyway, this Ananias was corrupt, right? So I want you to imagine somebody that you know is corrupt, is sitting there telling you you're unjust and you should be slapped on the mouth, and then you get slapped. Now, you look at them, are you thinking like, oh, he was right? No, right? And you already hearing what you're saying in your head. This dude right here. But this dude. A lot of people had problems with the election this year for president, didn't they? Because we kept looking at the character of people, and we were like, and then when they would talk about each other, you would say, but didn't you? You had an email scandal, and you saying crazy stuff online, and but y'all sitting here and right? And what do? I'm just gonna sit here and drink my tea because I'm shocked. This is what Paul. So Paul knew about Ananias, so he was like, for real. Out of all the people that judge me, you judge me. Now, how many of you said that in your head or in your heart? Out of all the people that say something to me, who are you to speak to me? This guy, for real. Right, and that's what Paul did. He let it loose. Because listen, there does come a point where we're so frustrated that we do just kind of speak what's been on our heart for a long time. Especially when we know we're living right and trying our best to bring people to Christ. And then we get accused of crazy things. It comes a point where we just let it loose. And Paul did that. Now, after Paul got struck on the mouth, somebody told him, those who stood by said, would you revile the high priest And Paul said, I did not know, brothers, that he was the high priest, for it is written, you should not speak evil of your ruler of your people. Now listen, one of the things you want to know about that statement, Paul did not take back that the high priest Ananias wasn't saved. He didn't take that statement back. He was just saying, I'm supposed to honor this person. So what do you do when you let something slip like that? You quickly come back and say, you know what? That's not the character of God. That's not the nature of God. I apologize. I should give honor to you. Just like if you see the president, if he comes in here, guess what? We still have to give him honor. It doesn't matter if you agree with him or disagree with him. It doesn't matter if you think he's right or wrong. You would give honor to the position. Now, it doesn't mean if he doesn't know the Lord that he's not saved. It doesn't mean that. You still give honor to them. It doesn't matter what you feel. You give honor to them. Because the problem with Paul in this moment, he allowed his emotions to override his mouth. Right? And then some of us can attest to that. We've allowed that too. Have you ever been doing the right thing on the job, and then somebody accuses you of doing the wrong thing? But you know it's right. Right? You're trying to be a person of integrity. No, this is the right way to do it. No, you're doing it wrong. And then the person who's accusing you is one doing the wrong thing. And you know it. And you try your best to, but you just say, but you've been doing this the whole time. You ain't nothing but, and so what do we do? In those moments, we got to, you know what? That wasn't the correct way to say that. I should give honor and respect to you. I should do that. There's a saying, you have to give respect to earn respect. I don't agree with that. I just believe you give respect. It doesn't matter if you get it back or not. It's not about if you earn it, you give it. Because that is what the Bible clearly shows us. You show honor, you show respect, you show love, you show grace, you show mercy, you show truth. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't be bluntly honest with people. Jesus did that several times. He was unafraid to call somebody a whitewashed tomb. He called Pharisees the children of Satan. Now, that doesn't give us the green light to go around, you're a child of Satan, you're a child of Satan, you're a whitewashed tomb, ha-ha. But Jesus did it in a very graceful way, but very truthful way. He told them, right? And so there are moments where you have to be bluntly honest with people, right? I remember my dad, I called him up because my lights went out. And I was like, I need help paying the bill. And he was like, I'm not going to pay your bill. I was like, oh, why not? Because you're being lazy. Pay your bill. Now, I thought that was a little rough. I was like, hey, Pop, it's kind of mean. But it was honest truth. There was a time where a church asked me, we don't want you to pastor or lead anything. We just want you to preach on Sunday. And that was to get more members to come in. And I was like, oh, so you'll pay me just to preach? Mm-hmm. Don't pastor. You don't have to get involved with the people. We'll take care of all that for you. We just need you to talk. Yeah, and so I called my pastor back home. I was like, so this is what they asked of me. And he, my pastor back home, he's from South Africa. He's kind of a nerdy looking dude. He's white and he looks really nerdy, and he even does this sometimes too. And I told him that. Now, Pastor Rick always uses big words and all that stuff. And, when I talk to him, I feel like I got to get a dictionary out and, oh, that's what that meant. And then, okay, yeah, we can keep the conversation going. But Pastor Rick, he just said very bluntly to me, oh, wow, Joe, don't prostitute yourself. And I went, hey, what? What? Hello? Pastor Rick, really? And he was like, yes, that's what you'll be doing. You're prostituting yourself. You're getting paid just to share the gospel. That's all you're there for. You're just there to get a paycheck. You're not there to be involved in people's lives, Joe. That's prostitution. You don't do that. That was such a hard, blunt, honest truth. But sometimes you have to be like that. Right? Now, the way Paul did it this time wasn't a blunt, honest truth. Paul was just emotional. And he got it off his chest. But once again, Paul came back and repented. Right? So even if I'm being persecuted for my faith, I'm still there to talk words of truth, because my objective is to bring people to Jesus. You got to remember that. This persecution, even though it doesn't feel good, the total objective is to bring people to Christ and let the Holy Spirit speak to them. Right? If I let off how I feel, what does that do to my witness of who Christ is? In the drain. But I told him the truth, Lord. That's great. Now they don't want to hear anything about Jesus anymore. Right? Our witness is so important. The words we use, man, they mean so much. Words and actions you'll always remember. Can you remember almost every negative thing everybody said about you before? Or told you to your face? It comes back like that. Now try to think of the positive things that people said to you. We tend to remember like 5 or 6 of them, right? But the negative things, they stick out, don't they? And you got to fight through that. When you see that person, what do you have to do? Try not to remember what they said. But instantly, it just, you hear it echoing through your mind. And then you can't be with them. You can't be around them. Because you're having a hard time getting over that. And so imagine you were so bluntly honest with somebody in the most cruel way that you come to them and want to share Jesus. When I was in college, oh, this is such an embarrassing story. When I was in college, I tried to kiss this girl. And she, and then guess what I did next? Can I tell you about Jesus? What did that do for my testimony? Do you think she heard anything about Christ? No, all she knew was this little crazy dude. Right? This dude, and now he wants to tell me about Jesus and say, well, Jesus, he's the way. Do you know him? What am I really trying to do? Cover my tracks. That's what I'm really trying to do. And see, that's what happens when we just speak out. It's the same thing. People will only remember the thing that we just said. They don't hear nothing about Christ because they don't see him presently in front of them, because of how we're acting and what we're saying. So our words are so important. They're so important. Now, after all this happens, in verse 6 of chapter 23, it says, "Now when Paul perceived that one part of the Sadducees and other Pharisees, he cried out in the council, 'Brothers, I am a Pharisee, son of Pharisees. It is respect to the hope of the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial.' But when he said this, a dissension arose between the Pharisees and Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. For the Sadducees said that there is no resurrection, nor angel, nor spirit, but the Pharisees acknowledged them all. Then a great clamor arose, and some of the scribes and the Pharisees' party stood up and contended sharply. 'We find nothing wrong with this man. What if a spirit or angel spoke to him?' And when the dissension became violent, the tribune, afraid that Paul would be torn to pieces by them, commanded the soldiers to go down and take away from among them by force and bring them to the barracks." So essentially, listen, Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection. Pharisees did. And this was always a point of contention for them. Paul, when he talked about the resurrection, was saying very clearly, Christ is coming back for his people. Jesus will return because he's resurrected. I believe in the resurrection. Sadducees didn't believe in that. So the Pharisees, they sided with Paul and said he's right, he's innocent. The Sadducees said no, he's guilty. And then a fight breaks out. Now listen, I don't know if you've ever been around that. In high school, I remember seeing those. You see one group at the end like this. They staring mean. The other group's at the end of the hallway. And it would always get me when you open that stairwell door. So we gon'... hey man, we need to get back downstairs. And then it's always one guy, let's get him, and then they converge, right? And so it happens. When I was working with juvenile delinquents, it was 30 of them. One kid started to fight, and I grabbed him, and I looked around. Kids were coming everywhere. And they're not coming like, oh, let's go help Joe. They were coming, I'm about to get Joe real good. And they came and they start pounding and punching. And I remember I had to get somebody help pull me out, so I want to get torn up. And so what happened, this is the same thing that happens with Paul. A fight breaks out. And they see it, and it's like, they're going to kill that dude. We got to get him out. So they pull him out. Now, they pull Paul out. Now, you got to imagine, this has been a couple of days. He's been beaten to a bloody pulp. He stands and confesses who Christ is. They still want to kill him. So what do they do with Paul? It says, the following night, the Lord stood by him. So Paul's in jail pretty much. Take courage, for as you have testified to the facts about me in Jerusalem, you must testify also in Rome. Now the reason that God has to tell Paul to take courage, because just imagine it's you. You've been beaten. You've been left for dead before. You've been lied on several times. Matter of fact, you've been lied on right now. That's the reason why you're in jail. You don't know the expectation. Pain is present with you in your body saying you're not going to make it. Fear is sitting in the cell next to you saying, boy, this doesn't look good, Paul. I don't know about that. And death is on the outside of the cell saying, I'm coming for you. That's rough. That's rough. Have you ever been in that spot where you feel like, I don't know what to do? Lord, I want to do your will, but it seems like every time, and me and Tamika had just talked about this week, Lord, every time I do something for you, this is the end result. I mean, God, can I catch a break? I don't know if you ever prayed that prayer before. I have. Can I just get one break, one good thing, please? When I mean good thing, I'm not talking about somebody coming up saying you're going to make it. I'm talking about something works out. One time, God, please, I beg of you. And the reason I say this is because I was in a church in Colorado, and somebody told me I was filled with the devil and tried to cast a demon out of me. And, I was just fresh out the army, so I was still in my, just take them out phase. And I saw their heads, and I was like, this dude's really trying to cast. Okay, you know what? I'm good. I go to another one, and I'm told, like, you're racist. I'm like, I'm not. I'm not racist. It's just me. I don't know how. And then you hear accusations of, well, you're an angry black man. Oh, I don't know that. You can't talk in your vernacular. You got to talk different. As a matter of fact, we just want you to be quiet and shut up and do what we say. Then I do another one, and then a year and a half later, I get told, you lied. You're a liar. You're no good. You're this. You're that. You shouldn't even be. And so you sit down and go, what? Because here's the thing about pain. The pain remains from the past. Right? The reason we can recall when we got jumped because you remember how bad it was. And you remember how scared you were, right? Because the question that comes on our mind is, am I going to make it out of this? Right? The pain of trusting someone, and you say, Lord, I trust you, and then you get hurt, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, you continue to get hurt. God, is it going to happen again? I'm scared. I don't even know if it's worth it anymore. Right? And then the prospect of the future, I don't think it's going to work out. Right? I've met so many people this year that are getting divorced. And then I look at my wife and I'm thinking, I am committed to you, but I'm so terrified because of what I see. But I love you. I'm going to be, and those things are real because, Lord, I just want to do your will. I want to do your will, but God, I'm so scared. And I love what God told Paul. Take courage. Take courage because as you testified of the facts about me in Jerusalem, so you also testify about me in Rome. God didn't tell Paul it's going to get better, did he? Right? Because that's what we want to hear when we're going through those moments. This one's going to be better than the next. But that's not what God tells Paul. Take courage. Now, the way that God says that in the Greek, what it means to take courage means I'm going to infuse you with my strength to do my will. I'm going to comfort you. Some versions say, be of good cheer. That means be comforted because I'm with you. I'm not going to leave you. And he's telling Paul, you're going to continue to go on. And so what he helps Paul to do is to focus. He reminds Paul that his present sufferings are far outweighed by his future glories. Because what we tend to do is we get involved in the situation of now. We stand and focus on the situation of now. And unfortunately, what some people do is they stop living for Christ and they start living for their pain. Right? Have you met anybody, you say, hey man, you want to go to church? Nah, man. Last time I was in church, man, I got hurt real bad. Them Christians, they something else, man. I don't mess with them no more. Right? And then so you're not going anywhere, are you? No. So what are you doing? Oh man, I'm just sitting at home, me and Jesus reading the Bible, dog. Right? And listen, and you try to tell them, what sense does that make? That doesn't sound anything like God's word. And so every time you talk to them, all they talk about is the pain. Right? And it's not that the pain isn't real. It's not. But we got to understand, we're going to suffer for Christ in this world. And the suffering will end once we're with him. When my brother was playing football, I never scored a touchdown in football. I only watched my brother score one. And before kickoff, the coach pulls him around. He said, listen, Jonathan, you're going to catch that ball, and you're going to run to the end zone and score a touchdown. Jonathan was on the left. I was on the right. And so whoever caught it was supposed to block. And they were going to kick it towards Jonathan. I was too slow in high school anyway. They wouldn't kick it towards me. But they're going to kick it towards Jonathan. And the coach said, you're going to get hit, and it's going to hurt. Everybody else is going to get hit. And guys, it's going to hurt. But the minute you cross that line, Jonathan, and the minute you got to see him cross the line, all that pain is going to go away. So they kicked the ball off. And I'm nervous because, I'm too pretty to get hit like that. And so Jonathan caught the ball. I run up, I block, and I'm down. I mean, I hit the guy, he's down, but I'm also, But I remember it felt like a movie. You know those movies where you lift your head up and the battle's going on? I lifted my head up and I can see my brother just run and he crossed the line. And I kid you not, all that pain just went away. But while he was going and running across the line, you see him going ding, 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 ding. He's getting hit left and right, just bing, bing, bing. But he crossed the line, you hear touchdown. We all rejoiced and we didn't feel the pain anymore. It was all gone. And listen, that is the same thing. It's the same thing with Christ. This pain that we feel now, yes, it is present, it is there, but we don't focus on to the point that it rules us, that it commands us, that we do what it says. You will not trust this person because of what happened in previous relationships. You will not teach the gospel because every time you teach it, you're going to get accused and you're going to get kicked out. That is not what we do. We go forward in Christ because God is with us. Our joy is in Jesus and our contentment is in Him, not a situation. Right? This is why I don't like promising people that things will get better, because it might not. I've been there where I prayed for people and then they died right after I prayed for them. That was a bummer. The Lord healed them from this cancer and then they died right there. It's not. And I've also been there where I pray for people and then they're healed. It's a beautiful thing. But I understand that we're not about longevity in this world. We're not about trying to be comfortable. We're about doing the will of God, because our comfort is yet to come. The true comfort of never suffering again is yet to come. But while we're in this world, He comforts us by His presence and being there. And so my encouragement would be, you could be feeling right now like, God, I'm doing your will, but this is really bad. I don't feel like I have hope. I feel like this is the end. Like it's not going to work out. And God says, I'm going to send you where I send you, and you'll be a witness to me. Listen, I'm telling you, and the reason I can say it is because I've been all around the country, sent by God doing different things. And I can tell you, your situation, it may get better sometimes it gets worse. I've been blessed with a job that's paid me the most I've ever made, but I've also had jobs where we didn't make anything. I've said before, this year, was it this year? Yeah, this year, the month of February was one of the very few times where I've gone to bed hungry on a consistent basis, because I wanted my kids to eat. But Lord, what do I do? You keep doing my will. I'll provide. But God, I'm going to bed hungry. My kids are fed, wife is fed, but Joe's got a headache. You do my will. Gotcha. Sometimes it gets better, sometimes it gets worse. However, our comfort is knowing who Christ is, and we'll be with Him. So endure. Endure like a good soldier. Don't sweat it. Endure like a good soldier. Christ will give you comfort, and listen, you'll find so much joy in that. There is something to say when I am not satisfied by a meal and I'm starving, but I am satisfied by Christ and I feel full in Him. There is something about that just doesn't leave you. And I can't express it. I just don't know how to explain what that feels like, to know that Christ fulfills me and I'm satisfied. My stomach is growling, but Lord, I'm satisfied in you. I don't need this. If I can't have it, I can live off of you, God. There's something about that. I'm not saying stay in bad predicaments that the Lord is not keeping you in. Listen, if you're being hurt, beat, abused, and all that stuff, no, you need to remove yourself from that. But if the Lord says, I will give you grace to endure, take the grace. Be willing to trust again, hope in God that this is going to work out for His glory. Whether He gives me grace to endure or whether He removes me from it, who knows? But either way, take courage and be a witness. Wherever you are, be a witness. Amen? No, I like that one. Okay.